So, John, we appreciate you joining us in San Diego. We all know the news revolving around the Pac-12, so I guess I'll start right there. What was your reaction, and what do you think comes next for the Pac-12? And thanks for hopping on, man.
Yeah, anytime. I appreciate the kind words. I got to be honest. I was slightly surprised, probably, that happened, and it sounded like the Mountain West was a little bit surprised as well that it happened that way. One, just because of the financials that are involved with having to take those 4 teams there. I mean, it's going to cost a lot of money and take a good chunk out of the quote unquote war chest that the Pac-12 has built up to bring all those teams in. And it just seemed like there was a lot of collaboration there, obviously with the scheduling agreement. And literally one of the last things I had read, I think a day before that happened, was a story about, I believe the Oregon State president went on with John Canzano and John Wilner, who do a great job covering the Pac-12. And he was saying, like, look, we're just rooting for chaos. Like, we want chaos in the ACC because the best case scenario for Oregon State and Washington State is that somehow they wind up being like backfill candidates for the ACC if and when Florida State and Clemson and whoever else is going to leave the conference. So based on all that, I didn't get a sense that this was something that was going to be really imminent and happen the way that it did. I mean, I can understand it. I think they got the 4 strongest teams, obviously, out of the Mountain West. I think if they're looking toward like a Tulane and a Memphis, if they're able to lure them away from the AAC, then they've probably done about as well as you possibly can out of the group of candidates that are left. And the other part of it is just timing. I mean, they don't have a ton of time, even though it seems like 2026 is pretty far away. When you're talking about big decisions like this, they don't have a lot of time to meet that threshold. They had a 2-year window from the NCAA to be able to get up to a full conference. They've got to get moving on that. So I guess in retrospect, it makes a little bit more sense than it did at the time when I first saw the news.
Oregon State's AD Scott Barnes talked this past weekend about the expansion or the new Pac-12 conference. He says that he only wants to add teams that have both basketball and football. I know there's a lot of discussion of Gonzaga being a team out there that would make a lot of sense for this new Pac-12. Do you think that's the right decision to only bring in schools that have both football and basketball, and they're maybe making a mistake here by not capitalizing and trying to get Gonzaga?
Yeah, that was a little interesting. I mean, because Gonzaga was attractive enough, like for instance, to the Big 12, where there was a long flirtation there, and I'm not so sure that if it were up to Brett Yormark, he wouldn't have Gonzaga and UConn right now in the league. I think the pushback is coming from everybody else. So there's clearly some value there. I would guess that a lot of it is just about mouths to feed for all these schools that are coming into the Pac-12 right now. Because I just reading Dennis Dodd earlier today, there's a lot of questioning, I think, from within the industry, and particularly like folks on the TV side about, all right, how are they actually going to make more money, these schools that are coming over from the Mountain West? Will it be significantly more money? And especially the AAC, because it had the best G5 TV deal where teams were making between $7 and $10 million per year. And so if you are a Tulane or a Memphis, are you really going to make that much more money in this league? So if you talk about adding a Gonzaga, it gets a little complicated then with basketball and having to divvy up some of the revenue to them. So I would imagine it just purely comes down to, we need to keep this as small as possible right now to keep the pie as big as possible for everybody, or the slice of pie that everybody is getting, probably the more appropriate analogy there, as big as possible right now.
John Kurt's with us right now. He's got a great newsletter, Open for Business, ofbnews.com. With us on John and Jim, San Diego Sports 760. We'll see if Memphis and Tulane comes to fruition. Like you said, I think there's reasons to believe it will, and there's probably some reasons to believe that it wouldn't. Even if it does, eight's a small league. Like you said, you're slicing that pie in less ways, but you're only playing 7 conference football games, which would leave 5 non-conference games. That's very rare. In fact, it's basically unheard of in the FBS level right now. If you were adding a 9th school, if you had Memphis and Tulane in the fold, who would you add as a 9th football playing school?
Man, it's tough. I mean, honestly, I do kind of like, I know UTSA is one that has been thrown out there. Getting into the state of Texas, I do think there is some real value in that. And UTSA has been a school that's been on the rise. You know, Jeff Traylor's done some really good things there with that football program. And I do think you are kind of looking at potential at that point. Like, you look 5 to 10 years down the road, like what could be something really good for your league. So I probably land there, but that's maybe a part of the issue here. You know, UNLV, I guess the other one is a little bit of a curious case. Like, I was a bit surprised they were not included, just because Vegas seems to be on the come up with a lot of professional sports. It's obviously just a huge market to get into. I also know there were some political concerns there with them being tied with Nevada possibly, and also just TV ratings wise, they were not doing very well. They're not much of a poll, even though they are in a big market. So I can see UNLV being valuable as well, but if they didn't go get them the first time, that tells me that the process didn't really think it was that worth it. So because of that, I think I would probably land back on UTSA, but I don't think there is like a slam dunk great option, and that's probably a part of why they stopped at 4 there, and why the discussion right now seems to be, at least according to like Bruce Feldman's report, centering in a little bit more on Memphis and Tulane.
And there were reports today, I believe Pete Thamel reported it, that Air Force and the AAC are potentially looking at having them join their conference. And that would be the question of like, okay, where's the Mountain West going to go from here with losing their top 4 schools? And then Air Force, if they leave, like, what's next for the Mountain West?
Yeah, I mean, the Mountain West is going to be in a lot of trouble. And I kind of felt, when I saw this, it's like, it's just funny how the circle of life goes around for everybody in realignment, right? Because Oregon State and Washington State were sitting there saying, and rightfully so, like, hey, everybody just left us out to dry here. Nobody cared that our conference got taken away, and we're just left without a lifeboat. And then it trickles down. They kind of do the same thing potentially to the Mountain West. I mean, we'll see. They may be able to backfill and keep it going, but they could have done almost essentially exactly what the Big 10 or Big 12, whoever you want to put more of the blame on for what happened to the Pac-12. They just did it to them, and then you just see the trickle down of conference realignment. I think everybody believes that this is starting another wave. So unfortunately for the Mountain West and Mountain West fans, like, that is just kind of the college athletic circle of life right now, which is not a particularly healthy one. It's definitely not a good one, I think, for the long-term viability of the sport, but it is also kind of a toothpaste out of the tube situation where I feel like it's just out. That's how it works now. And unfortunately, it's probably not going to be able to get back into the tube.
No doubt about it. John Kurtz with us, ofbnews.com. If you're looking for more college football fans, San Diego State fans, ofbnews.com. John, you cover this day in, day out, week in, week out. The Florida State Clemson story that's played out over months at this point. It is kind of laughable, Florida State's start, but that's not going to play a role in what happens next for them. They've thrown so much money at this idea of fracturing the ACC or getting out of their television agreements, this grant of rights, so to speak, with the ACC. What's most realistic? I mean, they're hell-bent. Are they hell-bent on leaving, or are they hell-bent on getting more money, even if it's from the ACC?
I think it's pretty fair to say that they're hell-bent on leaving, and it is funny that they've started 0-3 and seem barreling toward like a 4-8 kind of season. It's just it just showcases how stupid all of this is, right? But yeah, I mean, they've been really, really kind of nasty towards the ACC. I think their attitude has been like, we've got to get down and dirty if we're going to win this case. I mean, they went as far as to make accusations in, the 4 lawsuits in 2 different states between Clemson and Florida State. It's hard to keep it all straight, but they made allegations against John Swofford, the former commissioner of the ACC, accusing him of nepotism by an old TV deal that they had where his son was working at the network that they were negotiating with on that, Raycom, I believe. And that was something that clearly, like, Jim Phillips took a lot of offense to as the current commissioner of the ACC, because he called it out at ACC Media Day. So, like, it's gotten pretty, they've been below the belt, in terms of where they're swinging, I think, in a lot of ways for Florida State. They were having public board meetings when this first started a little bit over a year ago that everybody could see, where they were just directly taking shots at the ACC and basically just publicly posturing like, hey, we're better than this. So I think they're out. Like, one way or the other, come hell or high water, they are going to be out. The real question is going to be, like, do they actually have a landing spot in the SEC or the Big Ten? Because, a lot of the reporting now, Brett McMurphy had a really big piece a couple of months ago. A lot of the reporting suggests that, at least as of right now, they maybe don't. Now, I do say take that with a grain of salt, because, we saw similar reporting on Oregon and Washington before they actually joined the Big Ten that was kind of the same. Like, hey, nobody really has an appetite to expand more and take schools from the Pac-12. But then when they're there on your doorstep and it's like, hey, this thing's exploding, we need a landing spot, the Big Ten did make room for them. I still doubt that if Florida State and Clemson were knocking, particularly at the Big Ten's door, to be able to get a foothold in the state of Florida as national of the conference as the Big Ten is right now, I would have a hard time that the Big Ten wouldn't at least offer some kind of limited cut to them. Like, they wouldn't be full-fledged members. They would be building up to getting the full revenue share there. But it is at least enough to give you pause. And yeah, I agree with you that the start this year is not going to really affect ultimately Florida State's position here, but it probably does make them at least a little bit more uneasy at this point with all of that reporting being there. And maybe the Big 12 is an option. I never really believed that until we went through this latest kind of cycle of reporting right before the season started. But maybe there is an outside chance that Brett Yormark could pull something like that off. So I think it'll be really fascinating because, like I said, I think the damage has been done, and Florida State, one way or the other, is going to get out of that conference.
Right. Some of the quote unquote dumbest parts of realignment is it's not really like a meritocracy. San Diego State's won a lot. That hasn't gotten them, into a power league. There's other programs like the Big 12 that have won a lot that have been, in danger of potentially not becoming extinct, but being on the outside looking in. And then you just have quote unquote brands, and brands really at the end of the day carry the day because of the value in television. And by the way, if Florida State and Clemson go to the Big Ten, that map ad is going to become like a 60-minute documentary. That map is going to be like all over the country if Florida State and Clemson end up there at some point. John, appreciate you doing it here in San Diego. Love your work on YouTube and ofbnews.com. So thank you for taking time for us.
Hey, anytime, John. Appreciate it. Great to talk to you, man.
Good stuff. Did you hear that, Jim? Call right now if